She walked into his restaurant like she owned it, took one bite of his signature halibut, and spat it back onto the plate. This is disgusting. But then again, what can you expect when people like him are cooking? The dining room freezes. The clink of silverware dies mid-motion. Conversations evaporate into shadows gathering at the edges of the room. At table 12, beneath the dim amber glow cutting through darkness, the New York Times critic sets down his pen with surgical precision. The sound echoes like a gavel. Through the service window, Marcus Washington watches. The kitchen's fluorescent glare creates harsh white light behind him, a silhouette framed in brightness, looking out into a dining room that suddenly feels draped in shadow. His reflection in the polished steel surface shows a man carved from 30 years of labor. Every line on his face a testament to battles fought in silence. 12 years. He can feel the weight of them pressing against his chest like a physical thing. 12 years of mortgaging everything twice. Sleeping on floors that left permanent aches in his shoulders. Perfecting every plate until his hands cramped and bled. Building the Crimson from a shuttered warehouse into a 3 Michelin-starred sanctuary where people whispered reverently about the halibut she just spat on a bone-white china. People like him. 3 words. That's all it takes. 3 words to dismantle a decade of excellence. To reduce everything he's built to the color of his hands gripping the steel counter. The hands that trained under Michel Rochet and Lyon, that learned molecular gastronomy from Ferran Adria at El Bulli, that earned every single accolade through work that would break most people in a week. He feels it rising, that ancient fire he buried somewhere deep when he decided excellence would be enough, when he believed that if he just worked harder, stayed quieter, kept his head down, the world would eventually see him. Not his skin, not the assumptions. Him, Marcus Washington, 3-time James Beard nominee, chef who'd memorized 500 recipes before he turned 20. The man who'd spent 7 years training under masters who initially didn't want him in their kitchens, who'd earned respect through sheer relentless perfection. His sous chef, Carmen, places a hand on his arm. Her fingers are cold against his skin. Chef, don't. Not here. Not now. Her eyes plead with him. She knows what that look means. She's seen it before, simmering beneath the surface during investor meetings where men address questions to her instead of him, during reviews where critics praise his urban flavor profile, during 1,000 small cuts that left no visible scars. Marcus sets down his knife. The blade catches the light, throwing a sliver of brightness across the cutting board. Carefully, deliberately, his movements are controlled, the kind of control that requires more strength than violence ever could. Then he walks out his kitchen. The dining room contracts around his presence. 6'3", shoulders broad from lifting stock pots and breaking down whole fish, and carrying the weight of other people's doubt for 3 decades. His white chef's coat is pristine, no stains, no creases, as if he's armored himself in perfection. The fabric seems to glow against his dark skin, creating stark contrast in the low light. Every eye follows him as he moves through the space, his footsteps muffled by expensive carpet, but heavy with purpose. He walks directly to Caroline Vanderbilt's table. She sits in a pool of shadow, her blonde hair catching what little light there is, her jewelry throwing small sparks of brightness. The Times critic looks up, pen hovering over paper, sensing something ancient about to unfold, something that will matter more than any dish he's tasted tonight. You spat out my food. Marcus's voice is quiet, the kind of quiet that arrives just before storms tear buildings apart, the kind that makes everyone in the room lean forward unconsciously, straining to hear. Caroline looks up. Her expression shifts like clouds moving across the sun, contempt dissolving into confusion, hardening into defensive anger. Yes, because it was terrible. And frankly, I'm not surprised given. Given what? The interruption is surgical. Complete the thought. Given what exactly? The silence that follows his texture. It presses against eardrums. It makes people hold their breath. When someone like you is cooking it, she lifts her chin defiant. Her voice sharpens to match the cutting edge it had before. It's nothing personal. I'm sure you do your best, but there are simply levels to this industry. And honestly, sophistication requires a certain what? Marcus pulls out the chair across from her and sits. The motion is deliberate, territorial. He doesn't ask permission. He doesn't wait for invitation. He simply takes the space, the same way she took the right to judge him based on nothing but the color of his skin. Caroline's body stiffens visibly. Her shoulders pull back. Her hands grip the table edge. Someone has just invaded her territory, assumed her space, disrupted her control. For the first time tonight, she's not the one dictating terms. You can't sit here. Her voice loses its cutting edge, becomes uncertain, almost childlike. I'm sitting. The words are flat, factual, and you're going to listen. You know why? Because you just reduced 12 years of excellence to people like him in front of a room full of witnesses. And one of those witnesses is going to make me or break me based on what you've already said. He doesn't gesture toward the Times critic, but everyone knows. The knowledge hangs in the air like smoke. The critic is writing furiously now, his pen scratching across paper in a quiet room. The sound is audible, permanent. Whatever happens next will be recorded, published, immortalized. Let me tell you about levels. Marcus leans forward slightly. The shadows deepen around his eyes, making them harder to read. I trained under Chef Michel Rochet in Lyon for 3 years. Do you know how many black chefs had trained there in the previous decade before me? 1. Me. Just 1. I was the first in 10 years. I worked prep until my hands bled. I memorized classical French technique until I could execute it blindfolded. I earned my place at that table through work you couldn't sustain for a single shift. Caroline opens her mouth. I'm not finished. The words stop her cold. I trained under Ferran Adria at El Bulli, the most innovative kitchen in the world. I worked every position in this kitchen, from washing dishes to running the line. I've earned every single thing through work that most people can't even imagine. Every single thing. I don't have to. Caroline tries again. No. Marcus's voice drops into that dangerous quiet, the one that makes the hair on people's arms stand up. You don't, but you're going to, because in about 90 seconds, you're going to understand exactly what you just did. You're going to understand that you made an assumption based on nothing but prejudice. And that assumption is about to cost you something. He stands. The motion is fluid, controlled. He walks back toward his kitchen, and every person in that dining room, including the Times critic, watches him go. The light behind him creates a halo effect, turning him into something almost ethereal. The critic calls the sommelier over, whispering something urgent. In the kitchen, Marcus's hands move with practiced precision. Not his signature halibut. Something different. Something that makes his staff step back and watch with reverence. They know what this means. It's his grandmother's recipe. The one she taught him when he was 6 years old in a kitchen that had cracked linoleum and a stove that only worked on 2 burners. Before Lyon. Before El Bulli. Before Michelin stars and James Beard nominations. Before the world told him that fine dining required French technique and European training, and everything except what his grandmother had already given him. Pan-seared catfish with collard greens puree, cornbread soil that crumbles like memory, and a reduction made from her hot sauce recipe. The one she'd bottled in mason jars and sold at the church fundraiser. The one that taught him cooking wasn't about sophistication. It was about love. It was about legacy. It was about showing people who you were through the only language that mattered when everything else was denied to you. His hands don't shake as he plates. The catfish is perfectly golden, the skin crispy and glistening. The puree is smooth as silk, bright green against the white plate. The cornbread soil provides texture, little golden fragments that catch the light. The reduction forms a perfect arc, dark and glossy. It's beautiful. More than that, it's honest. When he returns, carrying the plate himself instead of sending it through service, the dining room leans forward collectively. Other guests crane their necks. The photographer at table 8 lifts her camera instinctively, then lowers it, sensing something too sacred to capture. This, Marcus says, setting the plate in front of Caroline with the same care he'd use handling something precious, is what I learned before I learned your world. And this is what I never forgot. He watches her face. Watches her look down at the plate with something like confusion. Her fork hovers. She's afraid now he can see it. Afraid of being wrong. afraid of what this moment means. She takes the first bite. Her eyes widen. The change is visible, measurable. Her hand trembles slightly as she sets down the fork, then immediately picks it up again. Another bite, then another. She's not performing now. She's not judging. She's experiencing something that's dismantling her assumptions bite by bite. Around her, the restaurant has gone perfectly silent. Even the kitchen has quieted. Everyone is witnessing her transformation, this moment of recognition breaking across her face like dawn. The Times critic tastes his own plate. Marcus had one sent over without asking. Something shifts in his expression. Recognition. Understanding. The kind of realization that changes the trajectory of a review, that transforms observation into revelation. Caroline sets down her fork slowly. Her hands are shaking now, genuinely trembling. The word comes out broken. She tries again. But the words won't form. She looks directly at Marcus, standing at the threshold between the dining room and his kingdom. In that moment, something breaks in her expression. Not just humility, recognition. The painful, necessary kind. What is your name? Her voice is smaller now, more human, stripped of the armor wealth provides. Marcus Washington. Each word is delivered with precision. I own this restaurant. I trained under masters for 7 years. I have 3 Michelin recommendations and 4 James Beard nominations. And you just sat in my dining room and suggested that my food was bad because of who I am. Caroline's face goes pale. Even in the dim light, the change is visible. The color drains from her cheeks. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. Marcus says it quietly, without malice. Just fact. You meant exactly like that. Because money has taught you that you can say anything to anyone, and there are no consequences. That when you reduce people to stereotypes, it doesn't matter. That people like me don't belong in spaces like this, in positions like these, creating things like this. Behind him, his entire staff has emerged from the kitchen. Carmen, his sous chef. James, his pastry chef. Maria, who works prep. They stand in the doorway, backlit, a united front. Carmen is nodding slowly. Not a warning this time, but affirmation. In their eyes, Marcus can see they all recognize the same thing. A master teaching a novice what excellence actually demands. But here's what I know that you're just learning. Marcus takes a step closer. The light catches his face differently now, illuminating instead of shadowing. Levels aren't about money. They're not about pedigree or family names or how many charity boards you sit on. Levels are about skill, about dedication, about sacrifice, about showing up every single day and refusing to be anything less than excellent, especially when the world tells you that you don't belong. Caroline opens her mouth, closes it, opens it again. No sound emerges. You don't have those levels. He says it not unkindly, without cruelty, just truth. That's not an insult. That's just what happens when everything has always been easy for you. He turns away, walking back toward his station. The light shifts again, shadows playing across the white of his coat. Your meal is on the house. Both dishes. And when you're finished, I'd like you to make a donation to the James Beard Foundation's Emerging Chef Program for students of color. The same program that would have rejected me 30 years ago if I'd applied. It's tax deductible, so I don't feel too bad asking. Behind him, he hears Caroline laugh. It's not the sharp cutting sound from before. This is genuine. A laugh that sounds like someone recognizing a mirror held up to their face. The kind of laugh that comes when you just learn something painful and necessary about yourself. An hour later, the donation is made. $50,000. The Times critic approaches Marcus before leaving. He doesn't speak. Some moments transcend language. He simply shakes Marcus's hand, holding it for a beat longer than necessary, his eyes communicating everything words can't. The review runs the following Sunday. Marcus reads it standing in his kitchen before service. The newspaper spread across the steel prep table. At the Crimson, Chef Marcus Washington doesn't just cook. He testifies. He teaches. He transforms. In a world that has consistently tried to diminish him, He has created something magnificent. And the truly revolutionary thing about his cooking is that it refuses to apologize for exactly who and what it is. That's not fusion cuisine. That's mastery born from survival, refined through excellence, and offered without compromise. In his grandmother's catfish, I tasted not just food, but resistance. Not just flavor, but defiance. Not just technique, but truth. That's a 3-star experience. The Crimson earns its stars that year. Caroline donations fund 5 additional scholarships. 5 lives change before they even begin. 5 young chefs who won't have to fight quite as hard, though they'll still have to fight. And Marcus Washington, who had worked in kitchens where his name wasn't even on the reservation pad, whose genius was questioned until someone with the right credentials validated it, becomes the youngest black 3 Michelin-starred chef in New York history. But the real victory isn't the stars. It never was. It's that moment when one woman understood, excellence doesn't apologize. It doesn't minimize itself for comfort. It doesn't shrink to fit into someone else's expectations. It stands in its full power and says, this is who I am, and you were wrong about me. It's the moment when the Times critic finally saw what had been there all along, what he'd been trained to overlook. It's proof that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to let someone else's prejudice become your ceiling. This was not just one story. This moment is played out in 1,000 different rooms, in 1,000 different ways. Different faces, different names, but the same ancient battle. The same choice between silence and speaking. The same decision to either accept the ceiling others impose or break through it entirely. How many Marcus Washingtons have we overlooked because we couldn't see past our assumptions? How many times has excellence gone unrecognized because it didn't look the way we expected? And when you're faced with your own Caroline Vanderbilt moment, when you realize your prejudice has diminished someone's humanity, will you have the courage to recognize it, to change, to see what was there all along, waiting for you to open your eyes?